and welcome to End of the World News. I'm your host, Ben. I'd like to introduce my guest today. Usually I say my co host, but my guest today, Tim from the Synth Sensory podcast. Thank you for coming on, sir.
Thank you for having me, Ben. Nice to meet you officially and nice to be here. And I appreciate the invite. Very excited to see what we get into today.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm a huge fan of yours. I think you have a lot of great information, a lot of great knowledge, and I just love the spirit in which you communicate with it. So I'm happy to have you on the show, and I think my listeners will definitely get a kick out of this one. Maybe we can start a little bit about, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to where you are now, and where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. My journey, I thought my journey started in 2020, but now I'm starting to look past that and I realize I've always been, I've always had an affinity for the weird stuff. It's like I've got a portal beside me at all times. And because I think that realm's right there. And depending on your spiritual intake, the music you listen to, the people you surround yourself, the material you read, that portal either gets bigger or gets smaller. And if you're a Christian, you want probably that portal to be smaller so you can have a direct source to your Father. And I don't know if any of that made sense, but in my head, that's how I
Oh, it
think
did.
about it. And for me, that portal's always been there. And there was a lot of weird stuff coming through when I was young. And so I've always had an affinity for this weird stuff. But it was 2020 that pushed me over the edge. I was like, I can't ignore the conspiratorial nature of our reality anymore. It's there. It's real. And I got tired of people trying to tell me what to do, and got tired of people telling me what to put in my body. And we know all that. We were there. I don't have to regale everybody with 2020 stuff. So after that, I dove all the way in. I guess you could say I was red pilled, and I started the show. And for everyone listening, my show is Six Sensory Podcast. It's kind of a play off the Sixth Sense. It's a play off the portal that my crazy brain makes this, a portal analogy. But so, anyways, and it's SIX. I spell it out. Six Sensory Podcast, and yeah, talk about all this stuff, hidden history, weird stuff, alternative theories, conspiracy, all that good stuff, man. So hopefully,
Oh,
in a nutshell, that
oh yeah.
works.
Just a quick question. You mentioned that you're a believer, a Christian. Um, were you a Christian your whole life, or were you woken up in like 2020, started diving down the rabbit hole, and eventually that led to the Bible for you?
Well, I was a Christian not my whole life. I became a Christian when I was 15, and that's a whole other story. I lived in a haunted house, and
Ah,
we moved there when I was 10 and a half, I think. And there was a lot of poltergeisty stuff happening there. And I was in the middle of the spiritual battle because when I was 13, I realized okay, I haven't made any spiritual moves, and I haven't made any sort of pacts or promises with God. I'm out here, I'm alone in the abyss, so to speak. I'm just floating, and I don't know where I go when I die. So I was in that headspace, and it took me 2 more years to finally lock it down and become a Christian. I was kind of scared to become a Christian as well because of all the demonic activity that was going on around me. Like I said, it's a really bizarre, really weird situation. But yeah, I became a Christian when I was 15, and that really it changed my life for the better. I had some ups and downs from there, but it wasn't until 2020 that I decided I was going to dive into the Bible and really lock down and really look for answers. And that's when, and I use that term pact with God. I don't know how that comes across to people. Like I said, that's just how I think about it in my mind. But I sort of, pact's probably not the best word, granted, but I had a moment where I was like, I'm going to look for answers, Lord. I really want to know. I want to know what this is about. What is why are we here? What is this realm? What why are they telling us things that contradict with maybe things that we're seeing in the Bible and all that? So I locked down and I said, I'm going to look for answers and just help me along the way. And that's
awesome.
that's how I got where I am, I guess, with talking about this stuff on podcasts.
No, I mean, a pact with God makes perfect sense to me. You know,
Cool.
when the prophets were called in front of God, especially someone like Isaiah, there was a word that the Hebrews used, which was Hanene, right? Here I am, Lord, with everything. So I totally understand what you're saying with this pact to God. Let's go, me and you. Makes total sense. So today I was hoping we could talk about giants, different kinds of giants, maybe how they migrated over to North America, and we can just have the conversation from there. So where would you like to start?
Ooh, well, I do think they were here, and I think every time I look into it, it goes back a little bit further. So, and I got asked this on a podcast recently, excuse me, where the guy was like, I don't know, he was asking me about who do you think was here first, I think is what he asked me. And I think we see these waves of people throughout the millennia that were coming over here. And this is a relatively new field, too. There's not a lot of people out there talking about it. The mainstream likes to shut people down for talking about this stuff. They'll mess up your career if you're involved in academia in any kind of way. So I think it's I mean, I think that where do I start, man? You know what? Let's just start with something I saw the other day.
Perfect.
It's in Jeremiah. See if I can find it here real quick. And I know you want to get into giants and Phoenicians and all that, and we'll get there. But
Perfect. Take it away.
I found this verse, and I'm still the thing about the Bible is there's another layer right beneath this text, and you have to be dialed in to find it. You have to be looking as well. You have to have that 2020 pact with God moment, I think. Now, you don't have to word it that way, but you have to have that type of an experience where you're like, I'm diving and I need wings. You just give me the wings. I'm going to jump and we'll fly together kind of a thing. And this is one of these passages. I know that there's something esoteric going on here. There's another layer beneath this, and it's Jeremiah. And all through Jeremiah and Isaiah, we see these interconnecting threads to the book of Revelation. So it's like stuff that has happened in the past is is analogous to stuff that's going to happen in the future. So you might be reading something here. You know, we talked about the little season people briefly before we hit record. And some of the stuff that they're talking about in the Old Testament, yeah, it may have happened already. It may happen again. And this passage might be talking about two events simultaneously on a timeline that we just don't understand. But anyway, Jeremiah 23, woe to the shepherds who destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture, says the Lord. Therefore, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, concerning the shepherds who shepherd my people, it is you who have scattered my flock and have driven them away, and you have not attended to them. So I will attend to you for your evil doing, says the Lord. This is just setting it up, right? This is just the shepherds here are the rulers of the people, the figureheads, the leaders. Then I myself will gather the remnant of my flock. So we have is we have a group of people who've been scattered all over the place. Some of them have died off, some of them who knows what's happened, but there no matter what, there's going to be a remnant, right? So then I myself will gather the remnant of my flock out of all the lands where I have driven them, and I will bring them back to their fold, and they shall be fruitful and multiply. I will rise up shepherds over them who will shepherd them, and they shall not fear any longer or be dismayed, nor shall any be missing, says the Lord. Now, like I said, I think that this could be talking about, I'll add another layer to this. I think there's three possible layers to this. This is possibly talking about something that already happened, where the Israelites, the tribes, the lost tribes, if you will, went all over the place. I think the extent to which they went on this plane or realm or this globe or whatever planet, we just don't understand yet. They went all over the place. You know, from the tribe of Dan up to the top of the Norselands to, you know, there's people Inuits in Alaska that might be connected to the lost tribes. Like we just don't know yet. But like I said, I think that this could be describing three different things: something that happened where they were scattered, something that's happening right now where they're still scattered, and then a future moment where they're going to be brought back together. Petra, perhaps, I don't know. But that's how I read the Bible, and I think it's in passages like this. This is what I'm still trying to unlock. Okay, like I don't have my head wrapped around this fully yet. I know there's something here, but this is these kind of passages that make me think about the Hebrews coming over here to North America. God still
Mm.
sees them as part of the flock. They're just scattered all over the world right now. And we have all this crazy. I just did a show about this. Um, there's a wall that I've been studying. It's called the Chautauqua Wall in Tennessee. These guys, this guy on his farm found it and thought he was looking at like a headstone, and he started digging and he realized, oh, this is a wall. It's got Hebrew on it, man. And this has not been, it got shut down by the Smithsonian for real. For real. I know, you know, Smithsonian has the bones, and I know people love to say that. There's a reason why we're saying that, folks.
Oh yeah.
This whole situation. So, and I mean, there's other Hebrew stuff I could talk to you about, and we'll get to the Phoenicians in a second because the Phoenician language derives from the same Semitic stock that the Hebrew does. There was a split at some point. They're very closely, you know, they're at one point they had the same forefathers. But and I mean there's a mound up in this is a destroyed mound that was up in Ohio that I've talked about on my show. It's called the Hanukkah Mound. It took up 20 acres and it was a Hebrew menorah lamp earthwork. They
Wow.
they outlined a perfect menorah lamp and put it over 20 acres so it's like visible from the sky or something. Crazy stuff, you know, ancient alien stuff kind of.
Yeah.
It's like what's really going on here. They were over here, and I think that you get these little glimpses into that in passages like this in Jeremiah 23. They're
What?
scattered all over the world. They probably have different, they might look like me, they might not look like me, they might still be the lost tribes and have different skin tones. They've been, who knows how long they've been scattered. I mean, they were scattered throughout the ages. So I don't know where I'm rambling
No,
probably a
I'm
little
with
bit,
you.
but
I mean, I'm with you about the Smithsonian. I once listened to
yeah.
a podcast where this guy actually collected newspaper articles from like 1820 to 1940. And he had
Hmm.
collected over 18 periodicals within these various newspapers and how they found these burial mounds of giants, especially when they were digging out the railroad because they were moving all that earth. And they would just find these, and either the Smithsonian or a university in the area would come take away the giant bones. Like, oh, yeah, we'll show you, we'll show you. No, they didn't show them and they just locked them on up. But no, I'm totally with you on that point. And I think they came
Yeah.
over here too.
Yeah, there was a with the Chautauqua wall, there was a this farmer found it. The buzz in this was out in Cleveland, Tennessee. The buzz, the people got really like into it. Like everybody was like, "Oh, okay, we think you actually have something here." Everybody was coming from near and far to look at this wall, and a an archaeologist from New York came down. He was a professor as well. I'm blanking on the details, and he could read Hebrew, and I have an article where it talks about where he's like, yeah, the first time I came down, I got a carriage ride out to Cleveland, and I'm having dinner with the farmer. We're having a great time, and after dinner, he brings out pieces of the wall, and I was able to transcribe them on the spot because the guy knew Hebrew, and he's like, that's Hebrew, you know. That archaeologist proceeds to get very excited about this find. And I guess couldn't help himself. He reached out to the Smithsonian. They sent somebody out. The whole thing was squashed in 2 weeks. Never happened. Hoax. They threw hoax at it. They threw Oh, it was what the terrestrial mollusks, like carving patterns in the stone. They threw everything they
That's
had at
crazy.
it, and there was so much buzz about this site that the farmer had to rebury it because he was afraid of looters.
Oh, coming
So
and stealing that stuff?
yeah, and who knows what else? Maybe government agents. Who knows? So he covers it up, and it's not long until it becomes local legend.
Nice.
And then
Nice.
these guys refined it in 2018. It's a great story.
That's awesome. We'll have to get into that. But
Yeah,
I'll tell you what's
and
interesting is, they make it illegal to dig up Indian burial mounds,
hmm
but it's not because there's Native Americans in there.
right.
I think it's 100% they have bones, and who knows what type of bones. I mean, if you go back into the Old Testament, there's all types of weird creatures out there, chimeras, lion-like men of Moab. And I wonder if
hmm
in these, mounds that they say we can't go and mess with, these are really just the bones of what used to roam this earth.
Right, right. And so if we pivot to Phoenicians, because I think that they were coming over here. Like, there's one more thing I'll bring up to make my point here. There's another artifact from Tennessee. It's called the Bat Creek Stone, and it's a little stone that's got Hebrew on it, Paleo Hebrew. Um, that was on display at the Smithsonian for a while. They had it upside down, and they were telling everybody it was Cherokee. Another professor who could read Hebrew came into the museum one day and said, "Turn that upside down. That's Hebrew." Then we know pretty much. We guess what happened. They took it off display, and now it's been living in a back room for all these years. Um, I bring that up because there were Hebrew figures on that stone, but there were also a couple Phoenician symbols on there as well. So this is a very closely related group of people, both Semitic. And I'll pivot here and just say that yes, obviously I believe the Hebrews were over here, and we can have the discussion about whether or not we're going to call them lost tribes. I know that's kind of a bad word in many circles. I'm open to it, but in addition to all that, the Phoenicians 100% were coming over here. Phoenicians are Canaanites. This is where we get into the realm of the giants, because that the Nephilim blood was strong in these people. And there's a big difference in between some of the tribes of Israelites and the tribes of Phoenicians, their brothers, their cousins, if you will. The belief system was wildly different and way more pagan. And we see throughout Scripture where the Israelites fell into that. They felt the pull of the dark side, so to speak. But there's a constantly a push and pull between them and this type of Nephilim religion. But these people were all in. The Phoenicians were all in, and they've got the Nephilim blood, and they've got giants in their midst, and they were coming over here for sure. And I mean, if you guys want proof of that, you can look up what is it called? A Canaanite 3,000-year-old Canaanite shipwreck. If you just Google that, that'll come up. That was a recent find, and nobody's denying it. It proves that Canaanites have been sailing the oceans for 3,000 years. So they were definitely coming over here. And then Philip Beale, he actually he actually built a Phoenician replica boat. He called it the Phoenicia. It's perfect because he set out. This guy's a legend. He's still alive. I want to get him on the show. And I think when you look at guys like Philip Beale, we're knocking at the door of proof. I mean, I think we have proof, but this guy. So what this guy does was he goes through, tries to stay as historically correct as possible, builds an accurate replica of a Phoenician boat, and they sail around Africa. And guess what happens whenever they get around the bottom tip of Africa? They start
What?
coming up the west coast of Africa, and the natural currents start pulling them straight to North America.
Uh,
So
that's awesome.
not only does this guy figure out that the Phoenicians knew what they were doing and were seafaring for sure, it it shows you that the natural currents and it's not just from the bottom of Africa, it's from the top as well. If you come around Iberia and you come down to the Canary Islands, there's
Yeah.
another current that pulls you straight to North America. So these guys, these were the first pirates. The first pirates. Pirate lore comes from Nephilim Phoenician reality.
Oh, wow. I have a question for you. You're talking about the currents and then you're talking about the boats. What I do find interesting is that on the Economist cover that's predicting 2026, there appears to be out of nowhere Venetian merchants on it.
Mhm.
And I wonder what that's pointing to and how that plays in today.
Okay. I think that there are a lot of clues around us that point to this happening. I think there's a select group of people who knew about this. Um, the reason why we don't know about this is because of generations after generations of it being rooted out of our history books. But the people who founded this country knew about this stuff. George Washington and those guys, they knew about this stuff. And I think if you look no further than the Union Square in Washington, D.C., big, ornate, kind of a Tartaria looking place. What they have in there on one of the walls, they have these statues. They call them Roman paladins. If you look real closely, you see that they have shields, and what's on their shields are phoenix. Okay, I'm gonna tie this in with Phoenicia.
Mm.
I think that those we're told that those are Roman paladins. I think that the founding fathers and the people who built Washington D.C. were trying to say something else by putting that there, because a phoenix obtains new life from rising from the ashes of its predecessor. So what was here before they built DC on this land, right? The phoenix is resurrection, but it's also renewal. So it's like, what did they renew? We know that there was a group here with high math, high star knowledge, and that they were sorcerers. And I'm suggesting that Washington and company knew that, and not only knew that, they renewed that. And the phoenix is telling, because if you look at the word phoenix and you take the X off at the end, that's the first half of the word Phoenician.
There you go.
If you flip it, if you take Phoenician and you take off the shin, the CIAN, and put an X there, you have Phoenix. It's the same root word. It's the same word. So, and this gets really deep. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not just DC Union Square. I mean, this stuff is just encoded national treasure style into our cities and monuments, and even the architecture and all that. Like, New York's full of this stuff as well. Philadelphia is full of this stuff. It's not just DC, but in the Bible, they called Phoenicia the land of the palms. Tammuz, Ishtar's lover, was called the Lord of the Palms. So what you have here is you have Ishtar. She plants a palm tree in her garden where a fire-breathing phoenix bird makes its roost. And in the roots is where Lilith was said to reside, in the trunk of the tree. You got a lot of symbolism there, but the palm is the habitation of the phoenix. And we see that on the South Carolina flag. We see that on the Florida flag. And I think the South Carolina flag even has the palm with a little crescent moon, which is Hallel, the moon, Hallel ben Shahar, if you want to take it
Yeah.
to Isaiah 14. But
The devil.
the devil, Hallel, was the pre-Islamic moon god that they have wiped that completely out of the history books. But like I said, there's a small group of people who build nations who know about this stuff. There's a group of elite occultists essentially who built this nation, and they go
Well, don't
back.
we have the Osiris resurrection for all the presidents and stuff? And you know
Mhm.
what I find interesting about the Venetians? They're actually linked to Satan, unlike the other tribes. Because if you read Ezekiel 28, when he goes and has Ezekiel prophesize against the prince of Tyre and also the king of Tyre, and it's two different prophecies. And the second part of that to the king of Tyre is actually Satan, because it talks about, a lot of people think it's Satan because it talks how he was once esteemed and beautiful and stuff. And then, yeah, if you look it up, it's really interesting stuff. And then it actually talks about his fall and God sent him down here. So there's this link between Satan and the people of Tyre. And I
Yeah.
think that points back to Deuteronomy 32, 8 through 9, when God created the nations and he assigned a lowercase God to rule over each one of them. And it's
It
really
also
interesting stuff. Yeah.
It is. It also points back to the Phoenicians because where are the Phoenicians from? Tyre.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then
Absolutely. That's
during
a great passage. Go ahead.
Elijah's time, you had the king that shacked up, I believe, with Jezebel within the Phoenician family, and all but 7,000 Israelites at that time had turned towards Baal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you wonder what kind of intermingling between the people took place there.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
accept their gods. They probably also married their women.
I think you're spot on with that. What is it again? Is it Ezekiel 28?
Ezekiel 28, yeah.
Yeah. And I know this passage. I don't know why I always forget which one it is, but yeah. I think that this follows a pattern that you see in scripture where God addresses the king first and then he addresses the ruling spirit over the king. And I think Ezekiel 28 is a good example of that. And because he changes there, he's talking to the king of Tyre. That's very clear. Then he says, your wisdom, mass wealth. I forget where the break is here, but then he goes on to say, "You were in the garden
Yeah,
and wore
right.
all the
So he's
precious
referring
stones." Well, who was in the garden? Well,
the serpent,
the
Nakash.
serpent, Satan. If we're going to be Nakash, the Book of Enoch calls him Gabriel, the Gabriel who orchestrated the fall of man and the temptation of Eve. And if we go back to Isaiah 14 is the same layout, man. I mean, it's God addresses the kings of Babylon. There's a break, imaginary break, essentially. It's like a pause there, if you will, literary pause. And then he addresses Hillel ben Shahar, son of the morning star. Clearly, that's not the kings of Babylon anymore. That's a ruling spirit that they worship that's tied up in Venus and all this. And this gets real deep, but there's a male female aspect to this Satan.
You want to get into that real quick?
Yeah, let me. I wasn't planning on talking about this yet on a
Oh,
podcast.
okay. Well,
So
we'll
no,
come back.
we can. I just don't have it like I'm not locked in on it. But it was something I found the other night, and it was Asher. You know what I'm talking about?
I've heard the
Asher.
name Asher before.
Yeah. Let me see. Hold on, man. Let me find my notes on this real quick, and
Yeah.
I'll because this is pretty wild stuff. Um, like I said, this is something I'm studying, but it comes out of Assyria. And the word Assyria itself comes from Asher. This is what we're talking about. This is a ruling spirit over the king of Assyria. And that's Asher. And Asher, so, it refers to the city that Assyria was built out of. And it applies to the nation itself and to the god that they're worshiping. It's the god of the kingdom as well, because what they would do is they would name their cities after these gods. The Phoenicians did this as well. They named a lot of their stuff after Ashtar, um or you know the Rephaim did this as well, if we're talking about giants. But anyway, before Assyria was a kingdom, it was a city, and it was the city of Asher, and it was named after this state deity called Asher. And both Assyria and Syria come from this deity. And this is like what we said, this is apparently who was in the Garden of Eden, depending on how you read Ezekiel 31. So it's, in the book of Enoch, it's called Gadriel, but in Ezekiel 31, we have reason to believe it's called Asher.
Mhm.
These entities have many names.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and Asher is nearly the same word as Asherah. That's Ishtar, the Asherah poles. So you've got Asher and Asherah. I think you have a male version and a female version. So I think what we're looking at here is this trans Satan, bro. Don't know. I don't know how else to put it. And it's the same. I think it's the same entity we see discussed here in Ezekiel 28.
That's interesting. I have a
Yeah.
question for you. So, as we're talking about the spiritual king over these regions, and then you have the human king, Do you think at any time after Deuteronomy 32, when God created the nations like this, that they were in communications with the physical God, or was it always a spiritual dominion over the region? And could some of the second round of giants actually have come through once he created the nations?
Yeah. So okay. So just ask me that one more time because I want to make sure I got it. You're
So
not
when
asking
God,
about the Israelites. You're asking about
yeah, I'm asking about the other nations. Yeah. So when
yeah.
God created the other nations and
Hmm.
assigned a B'nai Elohim to rule over each one of them, and that's where we get
Hmm.
all these different pagan cultures.
Right.
And let's say Tyre was probably one of these nations, or the Phoenicians,
Hmm.
whatever that was. Do you think that these gods were actually walking around at this time, or was it
Oh,
just a spiritual, dominion over the region?
well, I don't think they took form in a physical way always. I think possibly they would if you were when it comes to Asherah and Ishtar, what we
Mhm.
see throughout history, time and time again, is that she comes to her group of followers and says, "Build me a temple, and I will come to you." She did that with Jack Parsons too. She's like, she didn't say, "Build me a temple." She's like, "Build me an altar. This is how you build me an altar." That's all wrapped up into Babylon working and all that. But that's nothing new. She's been doing that throughout the centuries. Even in the 1226 Isaiah's document, Isaiah's revelation with the Templars, German Templars who worship the goddess, venerate the goddess, says they started having um, visions of her, and she came to them and said, "Build me a temple, I will come to you." It goes back further than 1226. Anyways, I think that if they built the temples to these things, sometimes they possibly took a visible form.
So they'd manifest in
Yeah,
ritual, kind of like we hear
right.
today with, witches covenants, where they get together and they do stuff and they would see something actually manifest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting stuff. I think so too. I think you also see that. Did you ever see that show, God of War on Apple?
I don't think so.
So it was about some Hawaiian tribes like 500 years ago. And when neighboring tribes would go to war, the kings of each tribe would take like an hallucinogenic, maybe something like a DMT or something like that. And then they would go and, communicate with the gods, and the gods would give them their orders. And then they would go to war based off those orders of the gods. And that totally reminds me of how it was set up in the Old Testament.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's why we have, everything is cyclical. Things come and go in cycles. Nothing new under the sun, that whole concept. And I think what we're seeing is to use that word renewal again, we're seeing a renewal in the interest in these uh, substances of the little g gods, the DMT culture. This is how ancient man used to make contact. Because I don't know, maybe there was a time where some of these entities roamed the earth in physical form. I haven't seen a whole lot of evidence for that, but there's evidence for them being here nonetheless. They're around every nook, cranny, and corner. I mean, they're always here throughout this whole book, this whole Bible. Like I talked about, that esoteric layer beneath it, you can go through and see that these entities are everywhere behind all these other kingdoms. Especially, I mean, yeah, like that's where I think that's why we get passages like the one in Deuteronomy where it says, you divided them up according to the number of the gods, the little g gods. They're everywhere in here. And like I did something with Stephen recently. Shout out
Shout
to
out to
Biblical
Steven.
Living.
He's a cool guy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we went through Jeremiah, and it's was it Jeremiah 1 or verse 2, 1 and 2, where God says, hold on, I'll just pull it up here. God says, he's like, why are you Israelites, why do you leave me, why do you abandon your God? Look around you, none of the other nations do this. They stick with their God through the ages, they don't abandon. um and it's an insult to God that the Israelites would do that. And he goes in Jeremiah 2:11, he says, has a nation ever changed its gods, even though they are no gods? But my people have changed their glory for something that does not profit. This goes back to what we talked about earlier, where Yeah, the Israelites and the Phoenicians were once a Semitic people and they split off. And there's that tug of war always with Israelites being pulled into the Nephilim religion. And be appalled, O heavens, at this. Be shocked, be utterly desolate, says the Lord. This was, this is like a slap in the face. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me. And then it goes on. But there's a verse in here, and it's before verse 11. It's chapter 10, where God, to sort of further make his point, says, go to Cyprus and look. Go to Kedar and examine. See if there's ever been a nation who have abandoned their gods like you have of Israel. And if you look into who were they worshiping in Cyprus, who were they worshiping in Kedar, it's Ishtar, it's Aphrodite. It's They go by many names. It's probably even Asher, because in Kedar, actually, I looked, they had Atar Same and Atar, I don't remember the end of it. Basically, it's a male and female version of the same god. It's Venus. It's Venus veneration. It's Ishtar. But they had a male and female version. So I would suggest you could definitely plug in Asherah and Asher into that.
Oh
It's
yeah.
male female version of Satan.
And you see Ishtar, raising her head through modern Christianity, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that think that the Roman church, when it first started, was incorporating the story of Jesus with Mithraism, right?
Right.
Which would go to Ishtar, and you see kind of stuff they do.
Yeah, yeah.
But I have a question.
Go ahead.
You said that these other nations do not leave their gods, but yet the Israelites were constantly going back and forth. Why do you think that was? Like, why do you think that these other nations that were worshiping these fallen G gods, lowercase g gods, why don't you think they ever wavered? Besides a few, righteous Gentiles in the Old Testament, but why don't you think they ever wavered from their God?
I mean, I think George Lucas, of course, borrowing heavily from Joseph Campbell, laid it out nicely in the Star Wars epic. It's the light side and the dark side. And the dark side, once it gets its claws in you, is very much uh, addictive. I think once you start going to these little G gods, especially in the ancient world where this was definitely a thing. I mean, like in Cyprus, to this day, you can go to Cyprus and go to it's in ruins now, but it's the Temple of Aphrodite. Huge temple on the beach, and they've got a black stone there because there's always some sort of weird asteroid around with a lot of these occult religions. And you could see that millions of people visited this temple and rubbed the stone smooth. And I think that this dark side had its claws in these people.
So you think that, maybe it's like when you mess with a Ouija board and then these demons get a hold of you. You think that all these people that were messing with Ishtar and all that type of stuff, the demonic stronghold over their soul and the things they did was so strong and they had no way of breaking it, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's why they followed him.
Yes, and it happened to me. And when I was 13 and I was living in this house, man, I was listening to a lot of what I know now to be demonic music, and I was obsessed with, like all the dark movies, all the dark bands. I was Marilyn Manson, Type of Negative, Tool. Like I still listen to Tool, so I'm not trying to demonize everything about this, but like at the time where I was at, this stuff was the dark side getting its claws in me, and it took me 2 years to where I could even humble myself to get on my knees and accept Christ. I know the struggle. I don't know how to explain it, but it's real. Like the dark side has a big pull.
Oh, I'm with you. I picked up that. So I do Uber for my job, or I call it my mobile ministry, where I black pill people and give them the Holy Spirit to wash it down with. But I
Yeah.
picked up this one lady. She's probably about 25 years old. And, we get into some wild conversations as always. But she was telling me about how at nighttime, she will like all of a sudden her body will just go up to a 90-degree angle and she'll start speaking in German and all this type of stuff. And she doesn't know German. And her boyfriend sees it and he kind of freaks out. I'm like, are you doing anything weird, like messing with like occult stuff? She's like, well, I do the Ouija board every now and then. I'm like, oh, there you go.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's I don't, not trying to just continue to go back to my story, but I
Oh,
gotta
please,
mention
please.
this. That was a big thing in that house. because when we moved there, like I said, when I was 10 and a half, the previous owners had taken everything out of that house, everything except one thing. And I found it. It was in a closet upstairs on the top shelf, and it was a Ouija board. I
There you
found it.
go.
Of course I find it, right? Because I've got the portal always throughout life. I've got that portal that's like a couple inches, like right there, right? So I've got the portal. I've got this connection to the weird stuff. So of course I found the Ouija board and I bring it down. I didn't know what it was. I took it to my mom and I could tell by her expression that she I was like, oh, that's not good. So she got rid of it. I don't know what she did with it, but the point is that the people who lived there before us, they had three girls, three kids. Somebody in that house was opening up a portal,
Oh yeah.
and I think it was probably in my bedroom because my bedroom was the nucleus of this thing. So those things they open up gateways, they open up doorways. There's 100%.
I have a question. Now, I have this theory that everything we see on the world is first initiated into the spiritual realm. And in this spiritual realm, I think there's a network of fallen gods and their demonic offspring, right? They're spirits of the Nephilim giants. And I wonder if these, demonic, offspring, or maybe you go back to Ezekiel 28 when you have, the Prince of Tyre and the King of Tyre. Do you think that these demons or these Nephilim spirits possess these worldly governors, and that's how they carry out their will on all of humanity?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean there's a third passage too. So we talked about Ezekiel 28, we talked about Isaiah 14. There's another passage and it's Hezekiah. I don't remember the scripture, but
Mhm.
we could find it later. But it's Hezekiah and it's the same thing, man. It's like Hezekiah is asking the Lord for guidance concerning the king called Sennacherib. And I think, Sennacherib is a pretty bad dude, and he's got one of these ruling spirits over him for sure. He's a Syrian, if I remember correctly, too. And God says, "This is my work concerning the king of Sennacherib," and he says a couple things about the king, and then that there's that literary pause again, and then he addresses something else that's metaphysical, and he says, "She hates you." Hold on, who's she? Well, if you go and look at who they worshipped in Sennacherib's kingdom at the time, the chief deity was Ishtar. So,
Surprise, surprise.
that's all in here. This is just not talked about in church. I promise you, it's there. I think you've got your finger on the pulse, Ben, because you're bringing up these passages, and I'm just like, yeah, yeah, hoorah! That's what I see happening too. So yeah, I think that hasn't changed. I don't think this has changed. I think that this is happening with the rulers to this day.
Oh yeah, and that's one thing as Americans, it's hard to come to grips with. If you believe in a biblical worldview, and thank God for guys like Dr. Heiser and Gary Wayne. I love Dr. Heiser. Man, if you want some meat, check out
Mm,
his Naked Bible podcast. I mean, it really gets into it and it's really awesome. But what he's done with the whole Deuteronomy 32. And since I
mm,
believe I am a premillennialist, I think that the border still exists. Now, empires and might have changed here and there, but those original principalities that he put over the nations, I think they still exist. And, just for everybody listening to America, and all you have to do is look at our past and the occult roots of all that stuff. The God Most High is according to Deuteronomy 32 because it's not Israel. And I'm not saying that the God Most High is currently residing in Israel. I think that's what happens when Jesus comes back. But, it's one of these lowercase gods that's ruling over America right now.
mm. Yeah. We have a motto in this country. It's called "In God We Trust." Let me tell you something, man. That wasn't a thing until 1956. The people who founded this country were not doing it in God We Trust. I promise you that. Now, luckily, I think God used them to at least hammer out a good constitution
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But these guys were worried about, and luckily, they were worried about freedom to religion to worship their niche stuff their goddess worship and everything else. And luckily for us Christians, we're able to kind of get underneath that umbrella too when it's raining. Be like, oh, okay, so this works for everybody. Okay, that's cool. That's kind of cool. But let's not get it twisted. When you go to Alexandria, Virginia, and you see the Masonic Temple up on the hill looking over the whole place, like an eighth wonder of the world in honor of George Washington, that's not a man of the faith. That's a man of the order. And that's what who built this country was the order. And it's been around a very long time. And it goes back to these empires we've been talking about today. It goes back to Assyria, Babylon, Sumer, even. The order kind of morphs throughout time and it changes hands. But let me tell you guys something. The orders that we know today, the Freemasons, the Templars, the Rosicrucians, they just didn't spring up out of thin air. They branched off of this main order. And that's who started this country, was a branch off of that. I call it the capital O order. And so you've got what Templars in 1100 they show up. Rosicrucians 1610.
We're talking about America right now.
Right.
Awesome. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, yeah. So, well, yeah. So, and then I was just talking about, like I'm thinking about when we're told that these orders sprang up, and they did, but they sprang up off of this other order, like with the Templars. And I mean, I think that they helped build this country. Honestly, I think the Templars did. That's a hidden history that we haven't been told. But where did they come from? Well, these two guys, Hugh de Paynes and Godfrey de Saint Omar, were in Istanbul, and they were initiated by a Greek order. So there were Greek occultists in Turkey and Istanbul, and they initiated the first two Templars. So, and we know the Greeks go way back with this stuff. We get our Legends of Atlantis from them. And they give the first two Templars their mission, which is to go look for clues to our past, our order's ancient past. We want you to find stuff from Atlantis if possible, and stuff to do with the Anunnaki and everything else, because that's what we trace our origins to. So people can't, and that's who created this country, was people just like those two first Templars. These were guys who were getting orders from this older order, essentially.
And it's interesting. The Templars were based out of the city of London, right? But in way ancient times. And who was behind, um, the creation of modern America and modern Israel? Well, on one half of the equation, both of that is the British Empire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or British Freemasonry. 100% with the Balfour Declaration, from Lord Rothschild to the British Empire, or just
Mm-hmm.
how you said George Washington was related to the Queen of England at the time. And so many big Masons or founding fathers were huge Masons. I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but the Boston Tea Party was a false flag. And the
Right.
guy who's the guy that Paul Revere, right? He's the guy that led the whole thing. He was a Mason too.
I think if you go to Oxford and you look up the date that they say that the British Empire was started, I don't quote me on this. I think it was 1583, but it's a date in which John Dee was in the service of the Queen. So he represents the order, and he's there as the occult handler to the bloodline, to Queen Elizabeth. So that's what you see, is you see this, the order is always in the corner, um, giving cue cards to the bloodlines who run the nations. And yeah, it goes back to, for sure, it goes back to the British Empire, because John Dee, a man of the order, helped craft the British Empire in the first place.
So I got a question for you then. So as we know, John Dee was all doing types of Enochian magic, which he actually, made that term. He was channeling these, spirits, right, of the Nephilim in the spiritual realm. Do you think that maybe they gave him the idea to go over to America, and then he relayed that to the, the more royal order, but less esoteric order?
Yeah, there's some wild threads there. I mean, if you go back and you look at the Daughters of Fortitude, which was a document produced by John Dee and his scryer, uh, that reads just like all the other Ishtar stuff throughout history, where this divine feminine goddess comes to them and demands things, says, you know, either build me a temple or build me an altar. So he was in touch, I think, with that spirit, of course. And then when you look at the milieu surrounding Queen Elizabeth's court, you've got John Dee, you've got Sir Francis Bacon, who writes New Atlantis. It's a book that everybody who started this country read. George Washington, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, they all read New Atlantis. That was a script for them. They played that out. That was part of the encoded in New Atlantis was the blueprint to build America. And that comes out of Queen Elizabeth's court. She also has this guy named Thomas Gates running around who she knights, aka initiates him into the Templar order because Queen Elizabeth was an underground Templar. Thomas Gates becomes the first governor of a colony in early America called Jamestown. So yeah, there's some wild stuff there. And Queen Elizabeth was in an order called, let's see if I can get this right. Order Militia Cruciferia Evangelica. It was an underground Templar order. And what we see coming out of that order that she was in were the first Rosicrucians in 1610. So you can draw straight lines back to the origins of this stuff
Rosicrucians
every
are
time.
Rosicrucians are way more powerful than people want to believe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's also interesting is the Rothschild, but people that realize they're just fronts for the Knights Templars, right? So they basically kind of are the face people for the City of London, which was the original banking empire of the Knights Templars. They got disbanded, and then the Rothschilds named their name to. They were the Bowers, named it to Rothschild, which means Red Shield, and I think that's paying homage to protecting the Red Cross in the City of
Right.
London.
Yeah, yeah. I just talked to somebody, and that Red Cross, it's a Templar thing, of course. It's a lot of things, but um, I've read Templars who say that they got that from the Anunnaki. The Red Cross that the Templars wield is straight from the Anunnaki. And if you go back and look in some of the old Sumerian reliefs of these Nephilim priest kings, they've got that cross on them.
Yeah.
They also, some of them have aprons on too, where you get the Masonic apron. All this goes back to the same ancient order, man. And I mean, I don't know. Have you seen the guy on Instagram? I love this guy, man. He's the make it make sense guy. He goes out and he films like just weird stuff in like on the streets in New York and in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
And he's like, because it doesn't line up. It's like why are we in God we trust and there's like Neptune over there with the nymphs and
Yeah.
whatever else the the apotheosis of George Washington, all this occult stuff. He's like, make it make sense. And I'm like, he said that's his tagline, right? But like, I could make it make sense for him. They were occultists. They were occultists.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. Now, what time period do you think? Let's go back a little bit back to the Venetians and them traveling to America. What time period do you think this was? And do you think there was giants with them, hybrids, or just the lineage of these giants that went over to America with them?
Time period is tough. I haven't delved much into that. One of the closest things I found was looking into the Cherokee, because all the indigenous people of America have legends and lore of dealing with these giants. And in some of the Cherokee legends, you have what's called the Anukatani. And this was Cherokees in Tennessee who said that they were living kind of across the way from this group of giants who were sorcerers. And I think that those are mound builders of some sort. Those were descendants of Phoenician Canaanites and were giants and Nephilim giants. And the Cherokee waited until a plague hit these people and it weakened them. So the Cherokee were able to move in on them and probably kill most of them and drive the rest of them out. So that's the legend of the Anukatani here in Tennessee. They were the giants. And that goes back to pre 1500 by approximately 300 years. So 1100, maybe they were still here. When did they get here? I don't know. That's a long way around to answer your question, I know. But I can tell you when they kind of were here. And
Oh,
it,
okay. So when do you think there were here? And maybe we can
yeah.
tie it to this next thing because we were talking about it before the podcast was recording. But there's, buildings throughout America, mounds that you see that a lot of the people that believe we're in the short season, they credit that to the millennial reign. And I'm a premillennialist. And hey, if we're in the short season, great. No one wants a new heaven and new earth more than me. I just don't think we are. But could those buildings that they're all pointing to the millennial reign actually be a result of when these Venetians came over with these giants and built these up? Because if they could build the Tower of Babel, why couldn't they build all these other things?
Oh, they absolutely could. And that's the thing. If we're going to have a Tartaria conversation, we've got to at least have the mound builders on the table. The true empire builders, I think, who were over here. If you go to Yemen and you look at some of the there's ancient cities in Yemen to this day. It's the legends go back to Noah's children, Shem and Ham. They built up Ethiopia and Yemen on either side of the Red Sea. There's still cities there attributed to Noah's son's construction, and they have high-rise buildings, 3,000 years old. They knew how to take mud and alchemically create some sort of a concrete and build up. They knew how to build buildings. So I think you see some of the oldest, most sturdy examples of architecture coming out of the Middle East. And I think later on, they just became more and more ornate. When DeSoto got here in 1500s, he says he got up into Tennessee and there were ornate temples here.
So temples, not just mounds, but temples.
Right, right, exactly. So that's why I say, like, I don't think that this was Tartaria per se. That's a thing. That's a discussion for another day. There was a Tartaria. They sacked Russia in the 1200s, and they did it again in 1500s. They really ticked off the Russians, and that's probably why their history was erased. So there, we can have that conversation. But over here in North America, I think that these people just the closer you go back to the garden or to the Watchers, both events produced a lot of knowledge for people because you got Cain leaving the garden with the knowledge that was taught to his dad Adam. Cain goes out and starts the first civilization where the first occult orders come out of. After the flood, you see one of Noah's kids. They go to the dark side. It's the line of Nimrod, and Nimrod builds the. It's I think it's the revival of the line of Cain because just like Cain builds the first civilization after he gets kicked out of the garden, Nimrod builds the first post-flood civilization,
Yeah, he was
cities
ahead of
and all
that.
that. So you've got two events where and then you got the Watchers in there, Genesis 6, where they come down and they teach people things. So in all of those examples, what you have is supernatural entities teaching mankind high math, high knowledge, high science, star knowledge, how to build, geomancy, everything. So the closer you get back to those little spots in history, I think that's where you get Cairo. That's where you get the pyramids. That's where you get, all that stuff. And those people brought those skills over here with them because make no mistake, they were seafaring. This is what we're not taught in school, but man has been navigating using the stars for a very long time. Very long time.
You mean we didn't come here in 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue?
Well, they did. I think they did, but here's the thing: where did Columbus get those maps from?
Yeah, right.
Well, I'll tell you where he got them from. He got them from the Phoenicians because he married into a Templar family. Columbus did. The Templars still had some of the old Phoenician maps. They passed those along to Columbus, so he knew exactly where he was coming when he came over here.
Did the Venetians go up into Europe as well?
Yeah. What were you saying earlier about Mithra? Where do you I'll answer your question, but let me ask you one. Where do you think that the Mithra came from?
Oh, the Mithra cult?
Yeah, in London. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm assuming it all goes back to somewhere in the Middle East,
Yeah,
and
I
it's all
think
part
so.
of the Egyptian mystery schools. I think
Hmm.
all these Masonic organizations, whatever it is, right? Whether it's the Masons, the Knights Templar, Shabbat Lubavitch, or the Jesuits, I think fundamentally it goes back to the Egyptian mystery schools, their gods, and it
Hmm.
goes back to the seven sacred sciences, which is the foundation of all their magic, which I think goes back to your point to the evil Enoch before the flood. And it
Hmm.
was somehow resurrected. I just listened to Gary Wayne talk about this, and he says that within Masonic lore, this Enoch, son of Cain, would have buried all these tablets below the pyramids. And that's where Hermes Trismegistus would have found it and then linked up with Nimrod somehow and actually gave Nimrod this ancient knowledge on how to build all these things.
Yes. Hmm. Nimrod, it comes out of, oh, let me see if I can remember
I
this.
think Cush.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's Noah, Ham has Cush. Cush has four sons, and one of them is
Nimrod is one of them.
Nimrod, and the other one is Canaan,
There you go. Canaanites. Yeah.
where you get the Canaanite. They were Phoenicians. They were early Phoenicians. So that's a cool lineage to go back to, especially when you're having a discussion like the one we're having today. You go back and pinpoint the people. Yeah, yeah. So to your question though, like, yeah, I think that these people made it up into Europe. Um, there's one thing I'll save for another time, but it's the progression of the god CERN or Sonunos.
Boom. I love that one. And go
And
ahead.
it
Go.
comes up out of, well, it comes up out of the Indus Valley, but it goes straight through Turkey and up into Europe. And there's more to that story, but I'll jump to Mithra real quick because I
Okay.
think that comes out of the Middle East too. Well, what we have there is London. Okay, the city of London it was an ancient city actually. It was called Londinium back in the day, and it dates back to 43 to about 50 A.D. But before then, before it was a city, it was a Roman temple to Mithras. That dates back to 240 AD. So what happened here is the occultists arrived first, established their occult center, the Temple of Mithra. The city forms around it. And I think that's the case with a lot of the European cities. They formed around these little pockets that the occultists had like planted their flag in.
And I wonder if there was giants, ruling those cities back then as well. Because if you start looking into the Basque culture, which is an autonomous region in Spain, and a lot of within the Basquian, belief system, they were pre-Diluvian, people. No one knows where they came from. Their language is a language isolate that have high levels of Rh negatives blood, its own autonomous
Hmm.
region. In fact, one of the regions within the Basque region, I forget what the name of the city is. The city name means ones whose language was broken. And within their, history, there was a battle with the Frankish people, and their mythology says that the giants came out and helped them defeat them. And this was around, 700 AD, which would have been before, the city of London or that Roman city state over there would have existed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about another giant who's mentioned in scripture. It's in Second Samuel, and it's Ishbi Benov. And I think if you break down this giant's name, it tells you a lot. It tells you chapters even. It's like, so the Benov, the Nov is a word used also in scripture to describe the witch of Endor. It's in her name too. So, but his full name means sits at the high place and venerates or talks to the ancestors slash is also a witch or a sorcerer. So his it's all encoded in his name, and I think that that perfectly describes the Canaanites slash Phoenicians because they put, you look at the Canaanite temple of El. It's up on a hill. It's on a high place. They worshipped on the high places. The Canaanite, the cult of Raphaim, they venerated the ancestors. They were like in the similar way that they got, like you said earlier, but they were using ritual to get in touch with Ishtar, right? They were also using ritual to get in touch with their ancestors. the ghosts of their Nephilim uh forefathers. This is a Nephilim religion, like, and also Ishbi is said to have had 6 digits on his hands and feet. And where do we see that? We see that on rock carvings over here in Tennessee and throughout North America. There are pictures of hands with 6 fingers on them, toes, 6 toes, and then there's all this other Phoenician stuff that we found over here. Like, for one that comes to mind would be the Grave Creek tablet from West Virginia. Found it in a mound. It has a little tablet had Iberian Phoenician on them. Where's that at? That's Iberia. That's Spain.
How to get
And
over there?
how did they get over here? Well, if you jump into the water at the tip of Iberia, that natural ocean currents carry you right to North America. How about that? So it all lines up. He also, like, what the so you got the Phoenician purple. I got to throw this in.
Mhm.
So the Phoenicians, what they would do is they would sail out of Tyre or Sidon, and they would go to this special place in the Mediterranean, this little secret spot where they knew they could find purple. They got it out of these sea creatures. It was like a gland that was in like a clamshell or something, a mollusk, and they would meticulously take out this little gland, and that's how they got Phoenician purple, which they sold all over the world. Why was it all over the world? Because they were seafaring. They took it everywhere. It was like a goods and services that they provided. And what do we see in Tennessee? I found old articles where they found Phoenician purple here in Tennessee when they were building a dam called Norris.
Is Venetian purple a particular type of purple? And is that why all the royals like to wear purple to symbolize royalty?
I think it goes back to that. I do. I do. I think that the whole wear purple, it signifies royalty, goes back to these old priest kings. Whether we want to call them the Nephilim priest kings or the Anunnaki priest kings. I think it's
Right.
depending on your mythology of choice, it's the same group. And little things like this are why things come about. So yeah, that would be, in my opinion, why the purple came about. And I think there wasn't a lot of, if we look at old records, if we look at the ancient world, there wasn't a lot of purple. The Phoenicians they cornered the market on that one. So it was the purple that was going around. And yeah, there was a temple that was found over here in Tennessee. It's under an artificial lake today. They found it and had it excavated briefly before they put in Norris Dam, and they flooded the whole area. But I have all the newspaper articles, and they were finding purple there. They also found strange that skulls.
Can we hold up one quick? You're telling me, and let's go into this. I like this. They found a temple at the bottom of a lake, knew what it was, and then they created a dam to flood it all so no one knew about our ancient past.
Right. Yeah. And it wasn't in a lake to begin with. They made it a lake. So they went they did this all throughout Tennessee. There's I think I've got 5 locations now that have ancient sites at the bottom of them. One of them is Chiaha, where DeSoto stayed. He called it a paradise. There was a Cherokee city there where he talked about they had the temples and all that. They had buildings and streets and everything. And he stayed there and took refuge there for weeks on end because they loved it. That their horses got fat, they got fat. It was a paradise. And that's under a man-made lake today. Tellico Lake is another one. Chota, the ancient Cherokee city of Chota, was there. By the way, they built that on ancient ruins from mound builders, probably from this going back to this high knowledge group. And yeah, that's what happened. I've got a list of so I've got 5 locations in Tennessee, and I've got over 20 locations in North America where this has happened, where they sent in the Army Corps of Engineers, typically built a dam and flooded all these ancient sites. And yeah, it was, in some cases it was 100% intentional, because it came down from guys like John Wesley Powell, who was uh, leader of or head, I should say, of the Bureau of Ethnology for the Smithsonian. They knew
There
what
you
they were
go.
doing. They hid all this stuff.
I mean, imagine the things that you would find in some of these mounds. I mean, I just read an article. They're doing some type of archaeological dig in Jerusalem somewhere.
Hmm.
and the article said they found some ancient priestess, right? And the reason why they thought that she was ancient priestess is because she had all these jewels all over her and stuff like that. But the interesting part of the whole article was, you know how many fingers she had? 6 fingers.
Mm,
And then if you read when, David was fighting the Philistines and it was talking about the sons of Rapha, the post-flood giants, they were specifically described as having 6 fingers and 6 toes.
yeah. Yeah, and that's what you see existing alongside of the Nephilim belief system is this goddess veneration. They kind of go hand in hand. And I've been calling it the goddess world order. It's what we saw in Jeremiah there in Jeremiah 2, where God uses an example, and the example is Ishtar. The example is goddess worship. That was ubiquitous in the ancient world. It was everywhere, and it's still around. Like, not only did they encode it into this country when they built this country, like Australia, Virgo, they signed the Constitution in Virgo, which is representative of the goddess Estrella, who I think is a spin-off of Ishtar. So, but you see it today in Hollywood movies too, like Ninth Gate, done up. The whole movie is a done up Hollywood version of a ritual to the Sumerian goddess Ishtar. And it's also a depiction of the mystical traditions of Ishtar and how she comes to people in these visions and stuff and leads them on these like Da Vinci Code like rabbit holes. Like a modern example of that, in my opinion, would be the documentary Hellier, where they were sent down this crazy rabbit hole. They felt like, I think Greg Newkirk said he felt like they had gotten in touch with a sleeping entity who was not awake, or I don't know. I forget the quote, but he felt like they had touched into an ancient intelligence that was just leading them down this crazy road of breadcrumbs and stuff like that. You see that with the Ishtar thing big time, and that's in that movie. That's shown in that movie, Ninth Gate. And you also had the seven-headed dragon associated with the Whore of Babylon in the Ninth Gate. The goddess
It's all
Babylon.
there.
Goddess Babylon. That's Ishtar and Anna.
Can
So
I ask you a question about
yeah.
Ishtar? And at least for me, is I got in conspiracies first before I really started reading the Bible. And what the Bible helped me do was put the conspiracies I was learning through a perspective, like what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, does it check out biblically? But in the Bible, there's not really a mention of female angels or female Elohim. However, within all these other cultures throughout the world, there is all reference to these female gods. And I'm one to think just because the Bible doesn't say that it didn't happen doesn't mean it's not true. Do you think there are female Elohim that these people worship?
I do. I do. Personally, you could also take the whole thing where it's like these people had an, I don't know, there was an androgynous quality to the way they did their worship and rituals. And it seems like they had a male version and a female like Ishtar, like the Hittites and another group had her under the male gods and the female gods. Did they come up with that? Maybe. It goes back to this being there's being a male and female counterpart to the Satan figure that I think that we see. Or was it just always like that and they just understood that? And when you look at Proverbs 8, where it says God created wisdom, and wisdom kind of takes on this life of her own. It sounds like they're talking about a real, I don't want to say, it sounds like they're talking about some sort of an energetic entity that we don't quite have words for, like, so, but let me not get like bogged down with that. But it says wisdom stood beside God and watched as he created the heavens
Mhm.
and the earth and was there helping him as a master builder. So what it is it's Proverbs 8 is alluding to a female presence that was there when God
Yeah.
created the heavens. And it's like, okay, so maybe Eve wasn't the first female. Maybe this is just something that's been around before we
Female
have.
Elohim. And, if you
Yeah.
go back to the Old Testament, there's a reference to the Queen of Heaven and not the way that we're taught through the Roman Catholic Church. In fact, it, kind of judges people who make cakes for the Queen of Heaven. And that's another term for Ishtar.
Hmm.
So even in the Bible, you kind of have this idea of female gods or female Elohim, fallen Elohim at least.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, like I said, and people can disagree with me on this one. That's fine. But I think that Eve was not the first female, and I think that the female, whatever we call it, the essence was already existing, and that was drawed upon and put into Eve. It already existed. So
Oh,
is
for sure. I mean, there's all those talks. So if Adam and Eve were even the first humans on Earth, right? Like you have the day six, which possibly could be a whole different creation.
mhm.
And they were told to go out and be fruitful and multiply, implying that there was women back then too, if that was a previous, creation or human creation before them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I'm not. I mean, it's baked into our subconscious or something too. Like I don't know. Maybe it's just all the goddess worship throughout the ages. But like even in, and this is more on the pagan side, But I guess like if you look at songs today, like now that she's back in the atmosphere, drops of Jupiter in her hair. Some of these pop songs, I think they're just goddess veneration, like or the one that's really on point is she's so high above me, like Aphrodite. You know that song?
Oh, I've not. No. Who sings it?
I don't remember. It's like a 90s band. He's
Okay.
like, but he's like, she's so
Mm.
high above me. And then she get like Aphrodite is like the next line. And like, that's exactly who we're talking about. Like,
Well, who do you
that's
think they channel the lyrics from? I mean, are you
right.
familiar with Chris Stapleton?
Yeah. Mhm.
Go listen to his song Broken Halos.
I've
And
heard
then
it before, but
right? And when you read that, I'm like, what are you talking about here? You're talking about fallen gods. I mean, when I read Broken Halos and when you actually hear the lyrics of the song and what he's talking about, how these angels come down to help us.
mm,
I mean, and he refers to them as broken halos. That's kind of the uh Kabbalah version of Genesis, right? How there was like this evil God and these good angels came down to help us a little bit, and then he
mhm,
punished them as well. And when he talks about it, and I think that, where do these people channel these lyrics from? I've
yeah.
even heard the idea is like, how many of our ideas are actually ours? I mean, how many of our ideas are the Holy Spirit and are of demonic origin? And I almost wonder if we argue with when we argue with ourselves, we're actually arguing with the Holy Spirit. And maybe that's why the Bible says, keep every thought captive, because you don't know where it's coming from.
Yes. I mean, yeah, there's another song. It's a modern song. It's from Halsey, and it's called Lonely is the Muse. And it's I think it's talking about exactly that, how you're able to what you think is the muse as a songwriter, it might not be it might be an entity of some sort, an ancient intelligence feeding you. Because I mean, I'm a songwriter. I live in Nashville, and
Hmm.
I'm more of a podcaster these days. I'm not in the music industry like I used to, but I've sat down and written songs and just wrote lines, just boo 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 boo. Like four lines will just pop out of me because I'm in the zone. Where's that coming from? Like half of the time when I write songs like that, I'd be like, wow, that was like super poetic. Where'd that come from? And if you listen to like the Halsey song, The Muse, it's pretty spot on because it talks about people writing hit songs. And then the muse goes on to another person. It's like the muse shows up where it's needed and it gives you like hit songs and gets you on private jets and all this stuff. And then
Yeah.
it goes to somebody else. It's like very much like if you look into like Blavatsky or Crowley or they kind of had that happen to them where they say these entities would come to them and they would sit down and they would write these books like the book of the law for Crowley when he was in Egypt. He's like, oh, that was Iowas. It was this angelic
Yeah.
thing that was
Right.
standing behind me the whole time, dictating this thing. Music is no exception. Well, you can tap into that, and I'm not suggesting it. I'm just saying music is no exception at all.
But I will say to this, I think that God provides an even stronger spirit, right? The
Yes,
Holy Spirit.
yes.
So am I saying like that's the thing? I'm a very supernatural guy, right? I believe that everything, like I said, I don't know how much of our own thoughts are ours, whether it's the Holy Spirit, these demonic entities that are placing, ideas into our heart, right? I find it interesting that when Judas was going to betray Jesus, he says he put the idea on his heart first, not his head.
Mm.
So I wonder where we get these ideas from. But yeah, I think you see it all throughout
You do. It's
history.
in the Bible too. It's where he gets inside of the head of some of the kings and has them do things differently. Like I'm trying to think of a good example. When I was reading through the Old Testament for the first time, I saw this a lot where the kings would be God would give them a thought, like you're saying, and they would do something they wouldn't normally do, and it would end up helping the Israelites, or helping God's kids, children. Like the king
Yeah.
would just, would have a change of heart or something. It's yeah, I think it can come from both ways. It could be good or bad. That's why I get caught up making these Star Wars references all the time, man, because I mean, yeah, that's a very mystical movie, and that's not why I'm quoting it. I think it's an accurate depiction of the light and the dark. I really
I've
do.
I have an idea where Star Wars came from. I
Yeah,
think
let's
it
hear it.
comes from the book of Revelations, where it talks about one third of all creation rebelling. And then I think they took a Gnostic approach to it and they
Mm,
took the creative aspect out of the source, or actually they out of God, and they created the source where it's more of this energy that's meant to be manipulated by co-creators like ourselves, which I think goes back to the Hermetic principles. But I think that idea of this war between good and evil going on, I think is directly from the book of Revelations, where it talks about one third of all creation rebelling.
hmm Yeah, absolutely, man. That's there's a lot in. I mean, so it's also the authors too that seem to have tapped into this of some of these books that have become these blockbuster movies. Tolkien comes to mind. He wrote, of course, The Lord of the Rings. He wrote The Silmarillion, which was like the creation story to the Lord of the Rings universe. And the whole time he was drawing heavily from the Kalevala,
Really?
which is, yeah, like Swedish, Finnish folklore and very mystical stuff. It's not Christian. It's not Christian. It's some version of probably of this, more esoteric religion that we've talked about today. And I'm thinking even about somebody brought this up the other day, the J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter stuff.
Oh, that's total esoteric. And she has
Right.
some type of Baphomet tattoo on her.
Yeah. 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 I mean, Marvel even like Marvel. You find that who was the main guy at Marvel? Stan Lee. Stan Lee and one of his other head creators were like studying Howard Hughes. And Howard Hughes had some really weird stuff going on and talking about metaphysical stuff. Howard Hughes was researching portals in the Pyrenees Mountains between France and Spain. Iberia. There's a where these Nephilim people came through originally in between France and
Well, I
Spain.
have a question. Is France north of Spain?
It's which one is it? It's Spain and then France. So Spain is on the bottom.
Oh, well, what's funny is the Basque region, which
Right?
is goes back to the Nephilim. That's right in the northern end of
Yes.
northern part of Spain, which would be the southern part of France.
Yeah, so I don't know. I felt like I really needed to check up on that. And yes, it's Spain and then France. France
Yeah.
is on top. Yeah, the Basques come out of that region as well. All these, this all goes back to the same sort of Middle Eastern group of people. I think this religions do. But yeah, so they were Marvel. They were studying Howard Hughes, and Iron Man was based after Howard Hughes. Some of the stuff in the Silver Surfer comics based after Howard Hughes. And then so on from there. It goes on from there. But Howard Hughes found out from there's an esoteric order out there in the Pyrenees Mountains who knows about these natural portal sites. Salvador Dali knew about them too. He lived out there, and a lot of Dali's paintings. Everybody knows how trippy those are. He was influenced to draw those or paint those by having the portal experience.
So do you
With
think these people go to these areas or these principalities that are known and they just do some type of ritual up there and they're just given all this knowledge and they come back and they carry
yes,
out these gods' agendas?
yes, absolutely. Because in one of the portals out there that Howard Hughes was poking around, the local legend there is that an asteroid fell to Earth there 5,000 years ago and it had a entity in the asteroid, like an egg almost. And
That's real quick. You know where that's from also? The not Lord of the Rings, but the show based off of Lord of the Rings on Amazon Prime about Gandalf coming before that. And he
really,
shows up like an asteroid coming down to Earth and blowing up.
yeah, yeah. There's like I said before, there's multiple of these asteroid stories that come bringing some sort of an entity that sticks around. So in this one, it's the local people believe that that was Lucifer who was on the asteroid. So there's a secret order of Lucifer over there. They're also cobblers. They build shoes and stuff. It's really crazy. They're not like
Shoes and
where
Satan. What do you want? Yeah.
they're not like gothed out wearing pentagrams and going to like Hot Topic. They're just they build shoes. They're like normal farmer dudes, but they have this crazy like Luciferian religion you'd never know about it. And tied in with that is that when Lucifer got here on the asteroid, a goddess figure came and helped raise him. She was sent from the stars as well. So you've got the divine feminine in that story too. Well, Howard Hughes finds out about these portals because they really are portals. They There's a lady named Patricia. I'll have to find her full name in a minute. I forget. She's written a couple books on it. She wrote a Jodie Foster movie based on going through portals
Oh, nice.
that became a movie that Jodie Foster played in. So anyway, Howard Hughes goes out there, and I'll make this short because I feel like I'm stretching this out, but he goes out there and sets up an underground base uh, below Mount Contigu, and he has
But he builds it himself.
yeah, he's the American
Oh, yeah.
billionaire, right? So, but he's working with the state. That's the whole thing. Hughes Aerospace was working with the state the whole time with all this stuff. It's like Elon Musk has all his
Yeah.
contracts with the state. So he puts in an underground base over there, and he's got CIA on staff. He's got no joke ex-Nazi scientists on staff, and soothsayer, clairvoyant, occultists all in this space, and they're all trying to figure out how they can utilize portals.
That's
And
crazy.
that's who Stan Lee was basing his characters and the adventures in the comic book itself was based loosely around this idea. And you see a similar thing with Star Trek as well.
Oh,
Uh,
Superman, right? His name was Kal-El, right? You have that EL at the end of his name, which symbolizes an angel.
mhm. Who was it that's a good one. Who was it that started Star Trek? Gene Roddenberry. So, do you know the story behind Gene Roddenberry
Now
and
let's hear
Star
it.
Trek?
Let's
Okay,
hear it.
I'm not, I'm just pulling this from the archives, bro. This is a little dusty, but he was involved in a government program, a government channeling program.
So the creator of Star Trek was
Gene Roddenberry
involved in a government training program. I mean, a
channeling.
government telekinesis program.
Yes, yes. He was in the room when they were channeling, and it's the nine. It's called. It goes back to the nine. They call it the nine or whatever.
I've
It's
heard that and
yeah, yeah.
maybe different things before.
But where it's where our government using clairvoyance, were sending these people like into like the astral realm, and they would make contact with what they said were nine entities. So they call it the nine. Gene Roddenberry was in the room as like a transcriber or something. And so he's taking all these notes, and later he writes the first strips of Star Trek based off of this experience.
Off the channeling experience.
Yeah.
I wonder what deity gave him that answer to do that.
So everything you saw in Star Trek has its basis in us talking to entities about these whatever, these other civilizations out in the galaxy or whatever.
Oh, see, that's what I'm saying. And when you start looking at, like you said, the CIA's involvement
Hmm.
in the production of Star Trek and all that type of stuff, I think it's these demonic entities that are kind of spearheading the whole thing, especially with the propaganda and starting to program us to accept the reality that they want to usher in, like it's one big magic trick. And I think it all initiates from the spiritual realm. I know it sounds crazy, but I've actually seen
No.
the spiritual realm. This is before I came to God and saved by grace. I actually did DMT about 20 years ago, and I saw this guy in the back, a lion cherub. Had never read the Bible. Um, my buddy got the bark from the Amazon, fermented himself, and I kid you not, a lion with glowing green eyes and no pupils with wings from the waist up came in. And before I got a word out, I started speaking in tongues of this thing. Now, it didn't give me anything stupid, like become a vegetarian or do this and that. But where it played a role in my spiritual journey is when you start reading the Old Testament and you start finding out, what these Elohim actually look like. It was exactly what I spoke to.
Mm. Hmm.
Like the spiritual realm is realer than this material realm, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I agree. I agree. I think that this story of the nine, these people were talking to these, astral entities or whatever. That's the unseen realm. That's what Heiser was talking about. That's the entities. That's their playground. They exist there, and there's a real thin veneer between us and them. And stuff that happens over here echoes in that realm and vice versa. And it doesn't you can make contact with these things like when I say it like that, I don't say it in a suggestive way. Don't make contact with them. We
Yeah.
have a great system for making contact. It's right here. It's in the Bible. This is the way,
And it will get you to the spirit that actually does matter, right? It'll
yeah,
get you to
this
the
is
Holy Spirit.
the original, this is the way. This is the original. This is the way from Star Wars, but it's or older than that. Obviously, they got that part right. But we have the potential to make contact. I know there's a lot of disbelievers out there with this, where people think that there's no spirit realm. Well, I got news for you. It's real. It's real, and these drugs are opening up the gateways to it as well. There was somewhere else I wanted to go with that, but I don't remember. I got a little sidetracked there with the entities and stuff like that. I mean, okay, Jack Parsons, I mentioned him. That's what was happening there.
That's the wildest story. The Babylon workings, him and the leader of Scientology
Right,
were actually trying to usher in the goddess Babylon or
right.
Babel, I believe. I forget, was it Babel or Babylon? What-
Babylon.
Yeah, whatever the goddess name. And you're like, wait a minute. The godfather of USA rocketry and the guy who started what did L. Ron Hubbard start?
Scientology.
Scientology are in the middle of Pasadena, and I know where that is because I grew up near there, performing sex magic tricks. And they're all tied to intelligence. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, they're doing Crowley magic. They're he's a Pat Parsons is a Thelemite, and if you look in the Thelema and that whole system of, it's like it's a religion that Crowley created, and if you look into it, it's behind out in the corner is it's based on goddess worship, 100%. Crowley for some reason did not put that front and center. He didn't tell people that, but it was based off of goddess worship. The whole thing was, because I looked into it, and that's what Parsons was doing. And they got in touch with this entity. It's the same one that came to the Templars in 2020 or 1226 and asked them to build her a temple. It's John Dee and Edward Kelly scrying for in London in 1583 or whatever it was. Divine feminine, same entity. and they create the British Empire. She pops up these major shifts in history.
So wait, so they created the British Empire directly from a visit from one of these gods. That's what she accredits it to.
Well, sh it was happening at the same time. So
Okay,
there's
well
a
there you go.
connection. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was happening at the same time. So yeah, there's a connection there. And there's George Washington said he had a vision from a female, a weird female
Can we go into that a
apparition.
little bit real quick about the
Sure.
so what
Yeah,
happened with George
sure.
Washington? That's really interesting.
Yeah, George Washington, they've tried to cover this up. It's kind of hard to find. But in letters and stuff it's documented where he was telling some of his people in his close circle that he had a visit one night. um he was calling it a vision, and he said it was a lady, an apparition came to him, but that she was real, like it wasn't a dream. He said this really happened, and she was calling him the child of the republic, and was kind of encouraging him to follow through with creating this nation. We're going to do big things, kind of a conversation, like you're chosen. And he was reading New Atlantis at the time,
There
and
you go.
you got to think like they were using that as a script. Like this whole thing was like laid out for him. And I think whenever he had that vision, I think in the pit of his belly, he thought, I am the child of the republic sent here to create this nation and to play out the script that's laid out in uh, New Atlantis.
That's crazy. And you kind of see them almost fulfilling that script right now with all the references about the golden age. Because when you start looking into that, that's just an occult term for Atlantis. They would call Atlantis the golden age.
Right.
And you have that passage that Jesus says it will be like the days of Noah and the final generation. Well, that was Atlantis. So I think it's interesting that they are using that same type of terminology when it comes to this golden age,
Yeah. Yeah,
reference to
absolutely.
Atlantis.
Well, and that goes back to this Estrella that I mentioned earlier too. She was said to have left the earth, and that she was going to return during the golden age. And there's what is it? There's commemoration art of them signing, I think it's the Declaration of Independence, and it's George Washington holding a picture of Estrella, or no, Estrella is holding a picture of George Washington in this art. So, like I said before, they signed it under Virgo, the star sign Virgo, which is Estrella, and it's just no coincidence that she's supposed to return during the Golden Age. And
Yeah, right.
yeah, they baked all that right into the creation of the country. There's so much stuff like that. Even Columbus, whenever it was October, I'm just going to say the 13th. I don't remember the exact date, but it was a day in October that they made landfall here in the New World. And what they did was they dedicated the whole land to a goddess called Our Lady the Pillar. You can go look that up. Her feast day is October. Her celebration day is October. It's the exact same day that they came over here. So they dedicated all this land to Our Lady the Pillar. And who is that? Well, I would suggest that that's our favorite, goddess figure, Ishtar here.
Ishtar.
Because what does Our Lady the Pillar go on to do? People, she comes to people in visions, and she says, "Build me a temple."
Same thing, different culture.
Yep.
You find that it's like, and that's what I tell people. It's because whether it doesn't matter which group of ancient culture you're talking about, whether it's like the Hindus, right, that religion, or pagan mythology out of the north, or Mayan mythology. I believe it was all the same gods that came down here, just under a different name. Now they might have had different principalities like they had in Atlantis with the 10 kingdoms, but I think they're all referring to the same gods. And it would have been easy for those gods to traverse the earth back then with all that, angelic technology that they would have had.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think just to tie a bow on something, because it just kind of hit me. that that whole George Washington vision thing of the divine feminine, that was his build me a temple moment. Well,
Which
that's
the
what,
temple to her would have been America,
right.
you know?
Bingo.
He
Yep.
built it out. She comes back, and it looks like it's going to happen.
Yep. Yep. And a lot of the places that George Washington picked were sites of an where this older group of people were living over here. There were giant bones found everywhere he decided to settle. Okay, all right, check this out, man. So Washington, PA. It's named
Pennsylvania.
after yes, it's named after George Washington. He went out there and surveyed the land and said, "I'm putting a city here." And it's there. There's a city there. It's called Washington. I've got an article in the other room where they found all these giant bones in Washington, PA. Washington bought land in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. One of the most mystical places in this country. We all know about the Mothman.
Oh, that's where the Mothman is out of?
Yeah.
All
And
right.
lo
All
and
right.
behold, George Washington picked that place and bought land there. He I think he was from or had settled Loudoun County, Virginia.
Okay.
Another place he bought, keep that in mind, another place Washington bought land was up in Ohio. They found this region in Ohio that he really liked. And he sent his neighbor from Virginia up there. He's like, you're going to be my special man to caretake this land. We're going to call it Loudoun County, Ohio. And guess what's in Loudon? Serpent Mound.
There you go.
So everywhere he picked goes back to the mound builders, the Canaanite, who I believe were Canaanite Phoenicians,
Oh, dude, I'm with you. I
and
think
giants. Og of Bashan, brother. What's the first serpent mound that we know of on this planet? Og of Bashan's got a snake mound out there in Bashan.
really.
Yeah, yeah. There's
Yeah.
there's Christian archaeologists working on it right now. These guys, I don't remember their names, but I heard one of them on the podcast recently. He said that they're about to put the book out on it. Like they found a serpent mound in Bashan, where we know Og. Og is a giant mentioned in the Old Testament. Like he's a Nephilim priest king through and through. That's where they got the serpent mound stuff from. They came over here and built one, just like in Bashan. That's what
Well,
it is.
I'll tell you one thing. I think politically, and like I said, I think if it has power politically, it has power spiritually. I think whatever's in Ohio is very powerful. There's a reason why they say the country goes whichever way Ohio goes. And I
Mm-hmm.
also think there's some type of secret fraternal organization based out of Cincinnati that every single president was a member of.
Yeah, that would be the Society of the Cincinnati.
Yeah. Can we
Yeah.
go over that real quick? And then we're
Yeah.
coming on close to the end.
Yeah,
Can you
man.
tell us a little bit about the Society of Cincinnati?
Yeah. Let me pull this up so I can give people some some facts here. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Because it's cool to have the dates. Okay, here we go. And so I've studied this and I put so much stuff into my brain. It's hard for my recall sometimes. I'm like, oh, what's the date? I can't remember all these dates, man. So it's cool to pull this up. So anyway, this society is they were extremely powerful. They were spearheaded by George Washington. He started it. One of the founders alongside of him of the Society of Cincinnati was a guy named Henry Knox. These guys decided where they were going to put all these cities. Cincinnati is one of them. Washington and Henry Knox picked where Cincinnati sits today because it's an ancient mound site. It goes back to the four ancient people of 900 AD. Like, look it up. Like these people, and what did the four ancient people say when they got there? Their legends say, "Oh, we settled here. This was already there was a race of advanced giants living here." So that's what's underneath Cincinnati. These guys come along and decided they did it for Columbus, Ohio too. It's on an ancient city mound site. Everything in Ohio is on something crazy. Of course, Washington D.C. is as well, I believe. But anyway, so part of the order of picking these places, I think, goes back to the Society of the Cincinnati because they founded it on May the 13th, 1783. That's 4 years before the framing of the Constitution in 1787. So this predates the country by 4 years. This is how the order operates. This order that goes back to Babylon. They come in and they set up shop and they do it in an orderly way. I mean, Washington was a Templar and a Mason, if you ask me. He's
Oh yeah.
definitely a Mason, but I think he was a Templar. So this is just the Society of Cincinnati is just a branch off of that older order we talked about today. He was president of the Society of Cincinnati 6 years before he became the first president of the U.S. Um, they were all the secret society members. They were all secret society members who were part of this. They were all Masons and initiates. They all founded this country. There were 23 signers of the Constitution that were in the Society of Cincinnati, and the society itself had 14 sub-colonies, one for each of the 13 colonies, and one a 14th, an extra one for France. That gets into Lafayette. Lafayette was boys with these guys. He was a member of the Society of Cincinnati. Lafayette was really into the occult. He was really into Franz Mesmer, who was a occultist from Europe. Lafayette would go visit Mesmer and tell Washington about it in letters. He was like, when I get back, I'm going to teach you everything that Mesmer teaches me, Washington, and you're going to love every minute of it. So, yeah, and now, I could keep going with all this stuff.
Yeah.
This is New World Order stuff, is what it is.
So Lafayette, as in like the city Lafayette?
Yeah, they named that after him.
Real powerful people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also find it interesting that Lex Wexner, he made his home in Ohio. And you're like, why would this billionaire could live anywhere, make his headquarters out of Cincinnati or Ohio? I think that's very powerful there, and people don't realize it.
Mhm.
I think it's all spiritual. Well, we're coming to a close right here upon 2 hours. Anything else you want to say to tie everything? Hey, listen, I had a great time. I shouldn't say it's always fun because this is my first time talking to you, and I hope to do this again. It is fun talking to you. Anything else you want to say? And one more time where they can find you.
Yeah. I don't want to sleep on this cities being on ancient sites thing. That is something that I think is very real, very monumental. And I like that we ended on that. I mean, I think, and I'll just tie it all up with this. I think they had bigger plans for Cincinnati. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm remembering some of the stuff I've read. They were calling that the original city of Seven Hills after the one in Rome, because these people were obsessed with the Etruscans, who were these occultists who built Rome.
Yeah.
The Etruscans got there before the Romans and all that. They
Look
were
at the
occultists.
goddess Etrusca. Yeah.
Yeah, they had the goddess Vatica. I wonder where they got the Vatican from, huh?
Yeah.
Right. So they had big plans for Cincinnati, and for some reason, at the last minute, they decided the capital was not to be Cincinnati; it was to be D.C. because DC also had Seven Hills and probably a bunch of other stuff that they like. So, but I just want to touch on that again. There was an ancient city where Cincinnati is, and it goes back to the mound builders, and just like everything else does in this country. So that's, yeah, we could do an entire other episode just on that, and I could lay out all that stuff. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying there's that much material. So, and the mounds are tied up with geomancy and all this other crazy stuff that these people knew about. So it's fun to get on here and talk about this and hopefully shed a little bit of light on this situation. So
Yeah,
thanks
well,
for having me, man. My show is Sixth Century Podcast. I spell it out SIX. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, Instagram, and Patreon.
awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much. I'm a huge fan of your work. Your podcast is great. So I recommend everybody, if you like this and you want to get into mounds in America and just everything, I think all your stuff is good. Check it out at Sixth Century Podcasts. And once again, thanks for coming on and thank you for listening.